It's December 2nd, 2022. Welcome to Podkaars. That's Dutch, it's a pot with a candle. My name is Rico Brouwer, I'm its host, talking to Teun van Sambeek. Now, pot with candle is literally conversations of hope that give me hope with people making the world a better place. Sounds a bit corny, it is, but it features a candle and a guest. Here's Teun. Welcome, Teun.
Hi, how are you doing?
And welcome back. So we have talked about the topic of today already yesterday in Dutch. So for our Dutch viewers, we will continue that conversation here, recap certain things, and then move in deeper in English for the rest of the world, so to speak.
Yes.
So what are we going to talk about? Just to lead that in, this podcast has its roots in the financial crisis 2008. It scared me and it got me back to school, so to say, on internet, figuring out how the financial system works. And one thing led to another, and now, years later, I'm still doing this. And we've seen, I made some different examples in Dutch yesterday, but let's make another example. We've seen the repo market, repurchasing market, where banks overnight need to have a clean balance sheet and not be defaulted. That market used to be banks lending each other money overnight if they need it. That market has died off like a year and a half, 2 years ago. Nobody trusts each other anymore, and then central banks step in to keep the banking system afloat. And also, European central banks has brought interest rates back to zero for countries borrowing. So nobody would buy the state debt that was issued anymore, except the lender of last resort, which was the European Central Bank. So the banking system is broken, you could say, and interest rates have risen on the debt of countries and people have risen to an unsustainable level. It's got me worried, it's got you worried, it's got many people worried. What can we do? And well, one thing that we can do is try to protect ourselves. So when it crashes and burns, we can at least have food on the table for our family, so to speak. But you can also maybe start working on a different system, learn from the mistakes in the past, and start working on something new. That's what you've been doing. How about this introduction, Teun?
Yeah, very good. Very good. Yeah, and especially I think the repo crisis moment, which was on the 16th of September in 2019, which was like let's say 2 months before Event 201. So I think these two things are very related to each other. So the repo crisis sort of ignited a new strategy by the central banks on one side, which was to bring down the interest rate very fast and start this money printing operation, which will lead ultimately to, let's say, the destruction of the fiat currencies in a sort of a hyperinflation event, or that's not an event, but it's like a period of time where everything will sort of hyperinflate. And to do that, you need some crises because these crises will give you the excuse for this money printing. So it's to me it was very obvious when the repo incident happened that a few months later, let's say this Corona crisis started, because that is a perfect excuse to destroy the economy and to give the governments sort of an excuse to borrow crazy amounts of money from the central banks and basically start the destruction of the fiat currency. So and that's what we are seeing since that moment. That's my opinion. And when the let's say the Corona crisis died off, the second thing that is also a very good excuse for money printing is the climate change story. I think it's a hoax. I think we need to be very, let's say, careful about our environment, but what they're doing now has nothing to do with that, in my opinion. And the other thing is war. You know, war is also a perfect excuse to print crazy amount of money. That's basically how it started. So that's how central banks got started in the first place. So that's what they're doing like 400 years. And
what we're going through is not new. It's when all else fails, they take you to war. so they can reset without it being obvious that that financial system is being reset, and the people in power remain in power. The people, the well-to-haves, remain in their in the possession of the goods of this world, and they start a new building on debts. So yeah, we have some new crises, but the cycle we're going through is not new. So you saw that with repo crisis, and you saw, carry on.
No, so what I wanted to say, I wanted to add a little bit on that, is that what we see now is global, and that is new. So we had this cycle before, but it was way smaller. So it started, let's say, in Europe with the Napoleon Wars, and then it extended to a sort of world war, which was not really a world war. Let's say World War I was also mainly in Europe. Then it extended to World War II, which was already bigger. And now I think the financial system is just collapsing worldwide, because now we finally have a sort of a world economy, and that's new. So that's why they need global crisis. So a war on its own doesn't really work, because you need to have a global war, and well, that's not so easy, sort of.
Well, that is what we're in the middle of now. I mean, we're picking a fight. All of the West appears to be picking a fight with Russia, and you can only. China's being lined up for the next bigger conflict of sorts. So,
exactly. And that is, and why do they do that? Because once this money printing starts and you have a war, then a lot of countries will fail, and the banks will gobble up all the let's say, how you call them again in English?
Assets.
The assets. If you have a loan, you need to back it with collateral. So they will just gobble up all the collateral, and they're already doing it. You can see BlackRock doing it massively with housing projects, and they're buying up everything they can get their hands on. I think they already grew to like $10 trillion, and this is all planned, and it is because they need this reset, because the financial system in the end is a pyramid scheme that will fail. I think what happened in the 70s is that it already sort of failed. So the Rockefellers went to and Kissinger went to China to add, and I was in the end of the 70s, to add China to the system. And what it does is you just add like 1 billion people to this pyramid scheme. And for a pyramid scheme, it's very important that you keep, let's say, increasing the participants, because when you increase the participants, this scam can go on and on and on. So, and with that, they extended, let's say, the system for another 30 years, and in 2008 it just collapsed. And from that moment, they slowly started to reduce the interest rates, and until you have the real moment, which was, I think, the repo crisis moment in 2019, and that was the sign for, okay, now we're gonna do what we always wanted to do, is crash it, take all the collateral and start communism, because communism is, let's say, the plan. It's they tried it many times before, and now I think that they're very close with what they want to achieve.
So you see this happening. You, with your skill set in your part of the world, you have to say where you are and what you do for a living, maybe.
Yeah.
And then you came up with So introduce yourself.
Okay. So what happened is that I don't know if it was by incident, but I always felt that I needed to go to Africa, especially West Africa, because that's sort of where you can see the result of let's say, that's the bottom of the pyramid. So what's happening here is like, the financial system is like a game of chess, where you always have somebody needs to fall off the system, and especially people in, let's say, West Africa are the ones to suffer most from it, and that's what they want, because the most assets, let's say, like gold and diamonds and other how you call them
rare earth minerals.
Minerals and stuff. They can be found here, and Africa is always sort of the place where they took all these stuffs from, and what is interesting is this: most people don't know it, but Africa is the only continent where more wealth is taken from than goes in. So all the other continents in the world are benefiting on what is being stolen in Africa. It's quite astonishing.
Yeah, so
If you
take
look
me
at
with
that.
your reasoning then. You thought, let's go there. How does that work?
Yeah, so I'm in housing, so I like to build houses. And what I saw is that, let's say, in the West but also in Asia, and housing is, let's say, all these places are sort of filled with houses. If you look at China, it's just crazy. An average Chinese almost has 2 or 3 houses now. And that's because of the financial system. When it's opened up, and if you have a heartbeat and you get a loan, then you can build, because there's plenty of money in the world. So there's so much money you can't imagine. It's like there's about 100 times more money available than let's say the entire world population is working with. So all that money has flown to a small group of people. But Africa is a place where you still need to build, and I like to build. I want to build. I think it's fun. So and Africa has a backlog of about 20 million houses alone, like almost 10 million in Nigeria alone. So Nigeria is like the place where they need houses like nowhere else in the world. And I have a sort. I like to think about building systems, so I came up with a system to do this. And I think I'm able to make sort of the highest quality houses at the lowest price. And with that, I should be able to build many houses here. What I notice is that nobody's interested. So especially not the United Nations, which you would imagine they were really focusing on getting African people housed. But what I notice is they are not interested at all in doing that. So and that's like 6-7 years ago I noticed that. I also noticed that for, let's say, if you have the most efficient house or apartment, then more than half of the Africans will never be able to rent it, or to let's say to get a mortgage for it. It will not be possible. And that's also when I thought, well, this financial system is just broken, because I call it the prisoner's dilemma. It's, to me, it's very straight. So if you kill somebody, let's say in Nigeria, they put you in a prison, and so basically they house you, they give you food, they give you clothing, and you survive. And that is more expensive. So more money is spent on that than on housing regular people. So basically you can commit murder and improve your life, which is not, let's say, is not the intention of being in prison. So that's when I thought that there needs to be something else. So I look closely to human rights, because housing is a human right, and this human right should be established here in one way or another. So how can you establish this? So that was when I got interested in universal basic income as a concept, because that is a sort of a concept where you can sort of guarantee a certain income to people. And that was also the time that Bitcoin broke through. So I thought perhaps it's possible to create a sort of a coin, a cryptocurrency coin, that includes a sort of a universal basic income concept, which can be used to improve, let's say, the income of people here, which will ultimately lead to house them, because that was sort of my purpose. I want to house these people. That, to me, is fun, and I think people would like to have proper housing. If you ask anybody in Africa what is on your mind, then the first thing they say is housing. I want to have a proper house. So
that is one of the
Yeah.
first things in a Maslow pyramid. You want shelter and security,
Yeah.
and food, but shelter is like one of the first things, and that's what's at stake in Nigeria, where you are. It's funny that you mention universal basic income. It's ingrained in my head also with that name, universal. Yesterday you explained that when that concept first was discussed, it was unconditional, and
Yes.
nobody's talking about unconditional basic income anymore. And that's the concept that you extended on with what you with what you came up with.
Yeah.
Because
So
yeah,
yeah.
carry on.
That story is quite amazing, I think. So let's say 7 years ago, they did some tests in Africa with unconditional basic income. So they just give people money every month, and they looked at it. What would happen? Would these people become lazy and just spend it on money or booze or whatever, or would they do stuff with it? And what happened is that when you have sort of security about your income, that you know that you will have food, then you can start thinking about what you do with the remaining part of that money, and people will invest it, and you even in small things. So buy a bicycle with a sort of let's say to transport stuff, or you buy a sewing machine to start a little sewing shop for to start your business. So that's what happens when people have a sort of secure way of income, and it doesn't need to be much. It's very cheap, and what happens is that when people don't need to, it's also psychological. When people are not, let's say, in their mind fully occupied by getting food, then they start to be creative and create stuff. So hunger is really an economic really bad, because people don't produce things. They make a lot of mess because they don't clean up anything anymore. They just go out for food, and that's what you see in the, let's say, if you go into some, let's say, worse bad neighborhoods in Lagos, you can't believe what you see. It's like Armageddon there. It's all broken trucks and oil everywhere, and it's just one big mess. And that's what happens when people are real poor. It just becomes a sort of biological hazard. So so making sure that people just have just enough to just survive, to get a roof over the head is very important. And if you just do the calculations, that's sort of how I started to look at the world. And just, so how much do they need? So how much is that? If you compare it, for example, with the military budget, I think with 1 year of the military budget, you can solve hunger and shelter in the world entirely forever. So it's like it's unbelievable, and you know, and you wouldn't have war. So why not just stop 1 year with that with that nonsense? Just do good things with it, and you solve a lot of, and that's just one little item of it. So it's crazy that it doesn't happen. So then you start to see, okay, this whole thing is intentional, because if people really wanted to solve problems, we would have solved these problems long time ago. So that's not it. That's not the problem. So the problem is there are probably some people, and they are in control of the system, and they want it to fail. They want to have people in misery, and that's also, so let's say, to cut a long story short, I came up with a sort of an idea how to create more ethical money. And a few months ago, I came up with that term, ethical money, let's say, contrary to unethical money. Because what I think is, what you see in the world, everything is based on unethical money, and the result is just unethical things, which is causing pandemics that are not really there. It's causing a war that doesn't nobody wants. So
apart from those things, the people printing this, the people printing the paper money, this is debt, and everybody feels that. You have, if you're well to do, at least you have your house, but you have a mortgage. That's a debt, and if you don't pay your mortgage 1, 2, 3 months, then you're out of a house. And you have your student loans, you have your car loan, you have your whatever kind of loans. Everybody's in debt and in loans, and so they're enslaved into that system. This is what makes me feel insecure, the people printing this money here. So what did you come up with?
Yeah. So I say it's the devil's tool, this money, you know, and then people in Nigeria are very religious, so that sort of resonates with them, and hopefully more than, because I think they still love their money a little bit more than the religion. but they won't admit it. So yeah, what I came up with is I started to look at universal basic income as a concept, and I wrote a book about it, and with a sort of an idea how to make a sort of cryptocurrency out of it. But a few months after I finished the book, I noticed that because I started to build it, I don't want to only talk about it and just have ideas. I also want to build it, and by building it, you just come into issues and you start to understand better what's going on. So I saw that let's say encryption is sort of a foe of one income stream, and so a universal basic income means, in short, that every single person has one income stream. He can't have two. He must have one, because if he has two, he can have 20, he can have 100, and that would be unfair again. So then it becomes unethical again if you are in the position to get more than one income stream. So it's very important that you get one income stream. Now, to do that, you need to focus on identity, because then you need to identify a person. And in cryptocurrency, it doesn't matter who you are, how many, let's say, streams or how many identities you use. You can have 30 different wallets. Nobody cares. But if everybody works together to give everybody, let's say, one income stream, identity becomes very important. And you also want to decentralize it, because you don't want to have let's say, an institute in charge of saying who is, let's say, who gets the right to have an identity, because then it's also slavery. If people can just take away your identity, then they can also will take away your income stream. So it's very important that you, as a person, you have the control over your identity. So these are sort of the concept that I studied very much. So years. I'm talking about years. So how you do that? What makes sense? What doesn't make sense? And the strange thing is there's another monopoly. Let's say the people in charge have two monopolies. I always say the one monopoly is to print money, but the other one is to get the insight. And so they know where this money goes to, who owns it, who pays it to who. So they have the insight, and nobody else have. And if you want to have a system where you, let's say, have one income stream for everybody, where you can get personal control over your own identity, the strange thing is that you can't encrypt it, but you need to open it up. So that means that everybody else needs to be able to check if you use your proper identity. So a self-sovereign identity is only possible if your surrounding people, let's say, agree with with you using that particular identity. So when that happens, then you're okay. And the same is about money, in fact. So instead of having one institute controlling everything, you want to have your people around you, your region, your neighborhood. These are the people, or your family. These are the people that keep you in check, that you are not committing fraud, and that's the only way that you can have control over your identity and over your money, and so everything is let's say goes about your self-sovereign identity is how it's called, and that is also a very strange concept to wrap your head around. There are a lot of institutes in Africa already 7 years ago working on getting sort of, and they called it self-sovereign identity. So you brought in your LinkedIn accounts and your Google and everything that you did, and then this institute took a look at it, and then they said, okay, now you're allowed to have an identity. Yeah? These were people that didn't have a passport, were refugees, but based on, let's say, the history they have, they could get an identity, and then people said, okay, you have your self-sovereign identity because you created it sort of out of nothing. But that's not really true, because now you're still depending on this institute that sort of looks at you and vouches you, but that's not a self-sovereign identity. The self-sovereign identity means that you are in control, so that you can decide, okay, my name is Teun, and tomorrow my name is John. That's self-sovereign. But that's very difficult for people to wrap their head around, because you can change your name anytime. You can also stop your basic income at any time, get a new identity, and start over again. But the interesting thing is that the people that are surrounding you, they will allow you to do that. So if you do that, let's say 2 or 3 times, people will say, "Yeah, what are you doing? This is not how it's supposed to be. You need to go back to your former identity, or else, yeah, you can move, you go to another continent. It's fine, and get your own identity. But we don't want to deal with you because you're not really trustworthy with just your identity and with your coins that are, let's say, connected to."
Okay.
So that's sort of how it works.
I am trying to wrap my head around that also. It is a new way of thinking. Maybe to recap what we discussed at the beginning of this conversation is we have a financial system and it's grinding to a halt. The debt levels are unsustainable, interest levels are unsustainable. And central bankers see that too. People in power see that too. Now, I'm in the Netherlands, which is a kingdom, although the king and the queen are a ceremonial function. But our queen, Maxima, has been advocating central bank digital currencies lately. Now, that's not her job, that's not her task. She's not supposed to talk politics or what have you, but the reasoning is, well, the money system is supposed to be independently governed by the central banks, by the European Central Bank. So our parliament is not in charge also. And you see these central bank digital currencies popping up all over the world. Every central bank appears to be working on a variety of that. Now, what's a central bank digital currency? Nobody knows just yet because it hasn't been implemented, but it's a digital form of money that can be programmed. So if I have a digital coin in my telephone, in my app, I could spend it and buy something of you, but that will be centrally registered, centrally administered. Central banks would see that transaction, would see how money flows, and they can program that money also. They can say, well, this money loses its value, or you cannot spend it on Teun, but you can spend it on somebody else. And what you just said is that level of obscurity where the central bank is in charge and nobody else can see it. What we replace that with is total transparency. Everybody needs to be able to check every transaction and every identity of the people that you interact with. Am I making sense?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that central bank digital currencies and sort of the thing that I am doing are sort of similar in one way, and I will explain later why they're sort of similar, but they're also the exact opposites of each other, and I also will explain what that means.
Yeah.
But both are sort of based on a total reset of the financial system. Let's say the pyramid scheme system that we had, which is dying, and which will not come back again. I don't believe that we will ever do that same thing again, because I think by then too many people will know what it is and what it was and how what it did. So we are heading for a hard reset, as I call it. And it's nice that you mentioned Queen Maxima, because she's also involved with African microfinance, let's say, schemes. And what they did in Africa is, I think, MasterCard already, let's say, connected identities. Let's say this what they call self-sovereign identities, which they are not, to also a sort of a universal basic income. So they are already doing these tests for many years, for like over 6-7 years, I think, is when I saw it for the first time. So these big players are looking at this already quite long, and it's quite clear what they want to do is to get control over your identity. And I think that's also what Corona was all about. So let's say the money that will be replacing the fiat currency will be a sort of universal basic income kind of system, and that evolves around your identity. And Corona, and especially vaccinations, are a very good way to give everybody a digital ID, because when you're vaccinated, it needs to be registered somewhere, and you need to prove it. So that's why they do that let's say that this scheme around airports and checkpoints, and so that you need to prove that you are vaccinated, and you can only do it with a sort of an idea. So then and obviously that will be digitally. It has nothing to do with health. It all has to do with getting you on a digital system that will allow you later to be, let's say, roll into this universal basic income type of money.
Conditional. That's the difference. The conditional type of money.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there are two U's. So you have UBI, which is sort of the abbreviation of universal basic income, but it used to be unconditional basic income. So the U used to be unconditional, and they changed it over time in universal, because it will not be unconditional. The central banks will put any condition they can imagine on your stream of income that you will get. So, and this hard reset, let me explain a little bit how this works. So what they're doing now, they're printing up so much money you can't believe. I think in 1 year they put like 25% of the money. They increased the money supply with 25% in just 1 year, and this is just increasing and increasing, because now you will see the first bankruptcies. You will see the people that fail on their car loans, on their mortgages again, and then the government will. So they already raised the let's say the municipality taxes, because your local government can't afford to do all the things they want to do, and all these taxes will be a burden on you also, including the inflation. And your, let's say, the small and medium businesses are not able to give you enough, let's say, loan to let's say to cover all your costs that you will get. So, and this will just increase and increase and increase. And I think 2030 is sort of their goal. So they want to have this done in let's say in the next 8 years. And what they want to do is get all your possessions. So they want all your houses, they want all your cars, so that all the possessions will go to the government. And then they say, okay, we stop doing all this stuff with small businesses, and now everybody starts working for the government. The farmers, the people that are working in factories, everybody works for the government, and the government will give you a handout, and they decide how much that is. So
hang on. They'll decide how much that is, and also through which hoops you need to jump to be eligible for that. So, carry on.
So the conditions. So it's all about the conditions. So they will decide what the conditions are, and this is like the perfect form of slavery. So they own everything, and they can just tell you what to do. Yeah. So, and they don't need to put chains on you, or because they will pay other people to put you in a camp or whatever if you don't do what they want. So this is just pure slavery, and that's how it ends. You know, because in a pyramid scheme, it will always end that all the collateral goes to this people at the top of the pyramid, and the rest, is just so. And they don't need all of us, so they only need like a few 100,000, or let's say a few 100 million of us to sort of serve them, and the rest, well, basically they can go to camps and die, as they did in the Soviet Union in Siberia, and
okay, but you see this is what you've been studying, and you extrapolate the trajectory we're on, and you came up with an alternative. So basically what you're talking about here is an alternative to what's now popping up, the central bank digital currencies. Can you elaborate on what you came up with and how that thing would be implemented?
Yeah. So let's say the opposite of having a small group of people handing out this money and, let's say, printing, because they will still print money, so what they call money, and they will distribute it over everybody with all these conditions. The opposite of that is that we say, okay, we don't allow this unethical way of let's say how humanity is being controlled, and we will replace it with something that is ethical. So now there are several options that you have, and it has to do with money creation. So the first question you ask is it ethical that a small group of people press a button, create trillions of dollars, and be in control of everything? Now, you can say, okay, that's not ethical, especially when you see all the wars and all the misery that they have caused with it. And also to get in that position, because that's how they did it. So now we could say, okay, we give this privilege to another group of people, let's say another 3,000 people, and let them press a button and then hope that they do the right thing. Well, history, let's say, it will probably just repeat, because these people will always say, yeah, but it's very important that we have our jets and fly around, and that we have our caviar, because otherwise we can't think properly and whatever. So, it will just happen. So, that's also not a solution. So the only let's say, but if that's not a solution, how do you create money? Who is in control of creating money? So the exact opposite of having a small group of people doing this is that you say, okay, everybody does it. So everybody participates equally in the creation of money, and that's why, let's say, my system is the opposite of the other one. So it's fully unconditional. So it doesn't matter who you are, what you did in your life, whatever, you will get, let's say, an equal portion of the money that is created, that is put in the earth, put in the world, for, let's say, to do economic activities. And to do that, simply you can connect money to a period of time that a person is alive. So you can say every year that somebody is alive, he gets a portion of money. You can even say if somebody gets born, you get one, let's say, lump sum of money. But to me, it seems better that you connect it to, let's say, small portions of time, and actually the best way is 1 hour. So that you get one coin every hour, instead of, let's say, 1 million coins when you get born, or let's say 10,000 coins a year. No, the best thing is to just get one coin every hour. And if you sort of do the calculations, then you also need to, so when you do that, when you give every person in the world, let's say, one coin in an hour, that means that you get 8 billion coins every hour. So, and an hours go on and on and on. So you get a lot of money, and it never stops adding. So what you do to get to a constant money supply in the world, so that you reach a certain level of coins, which is about 250 trillion coins, which is now, let's say, the amount, if you recalculate the dollars that are in the world. So if you take all the fiat currency, you make dollars out of it, you get to about $250 trillion. Now, if you get one coin in an hour, you depreciate with like 40%, then you get also around that number. So in the end, you end up with like 250 trillion coins. And that's sort of the way how you can create money, but also be sure that it is distributed fairly over everybody. And that has never been done before. And that will also make sure that the wealth inequality that's in the world now will be balanced very fast. It can be balanced within a few months even. At least in 2 or 3 years, the income equality is just balanced. And the
hang on.
is,
So maybe if I recap, then see if we can keep everybody on board. Because what you just said is kind of technical. And then move into, after that, we move into wealth inequality. Certain people will still get rich and certain people will still remain poor or become poor. That was not the main issue. The main issue was that people in control of the money printing system are not allowing an equal balance of wealth. So that's why you came up with a new system. But if I understand you correctly, if I live for another hour, I would have gained a coin, whatever the worth of that coin. I mean, it may be worth a loaf of bread or less or more, or whatever. Be alive for an hour, that's one coin, and it goes for everyone. So you have a massive increase of money every hour. And what you just said is, we need a way to decrease that also. Otherwise, we end up with a massive printing press and all money will lose value that way. So you came up with a way to depreciate that money again. You get a coin in that hour, and you better spend it within a certain amount of time, like days or weeks or months, because if you don't, that automatic system will depreciate that coin over time. So you came up with a way of people spending their money and not sitting on it, correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And what's happening, and that's in both systems, let's say in the central bank digital currency system and in my system, what will happen is a hard reset, which means that that the fiat currency will let's say crash into a sort of hyperinflation moment, which means that nobody is able to pay his mortgage, his rent, anything. So now the question is, this stuff that we created in the last 400 years, everybody worked very hard to create all these roads and buildings and keep people healthy and do all that work. So the question is, all that work that all these billions of people did the last 400 years, all these things we created, is it fair that it goes to this small group of people, or should we take control of it ourselves? And I think, when you understand how the pyramid scheme works, which is just criminal, because if I started a pyramid scheme with a company, which happens a lot, I noticed a few in Nigeria, so it happens still. People are still doing it and trying it and get wealthy of it and then just disappear. But if we would do it, we are criminals, we would be put in jail. But if these people do it, everybody is sort of fine with it, which is crazy. So we shouldn't be fine with it. We should say, okay, now all that work we did, my father and my grandfather did, and all these people did in the last 400 years, these are our revenues. So when the financial system crashes, we should take control over our own homes, over our cars, over everything, and we just stop paying. We stop using their money because it's enough. It has been enough, and it didn't work. It failed, and we're not gonna, let's say, reward them by handing over it without a fight, sort of. No, we need to keep hold of it, and then when we keep our own house, we stop paying for it. We will decide that we own it. So among our community, we'll say, okay, he lives in that house, he lives in that house. We make a new register. Everybody is in their houses, and we start to use our money, not their money, but our money, which is ethical. So now you need to imagine, in that situation, you have your house free, you have your car free, you don't have any loans to pay, so everything is free. Yeah? And it's not fair, because you have some people that just bought a very big house with a big loan on it, and you have some people that worked all their life for this small home but paid almost everything of it. So it's not really fair, but it's more fair than just that everybody loses everything they work for to this small group of people. So that is, it's always a better situation. And imagine when that happens, then you get this 1 coin per hour, which you don't need to pay a mortgage for, or pay. So the value of money also reduces a bit. So it's not so important to have money anymore, because the important things are already being taken care of.
That fair point, so that's not fair that people will make. It's ingrained in the way we think, because we've been doing that, like you said, for the last 400 years. You're referring to the time that we have central banks and a banking system. So that will be the last 400 years. I would argue people to look at, for instance, what Klaus Schwab says in his promo clip, "You'll own nothing," and then reverse that. If he says you'll own nothing, then your question would be, who would be owning it then? And the answer would be, well, the 1% or the 0.1%, the people owning the banks. So this is the choice that we have. Yeah. Will you own nothing, according to Klaus Schwab, and be happy because he feeds you? Or will he keep the house he lives in and the cars that he has, just like you will keep the house you live in the car, whatever your possessions are, and we reset from there, not giving everything to the people that own the current financial system anyway, but distribute it amongst ourselves and carry on on that way. Is that a good summary, Tijn?
Yeah, exactly. So, and I want to add is what they do, and it's a trick, and we need to be aware of this trick. So they will not say, oh, this small group of people that own these central banks own all that stuff. No, they will say your government will own this stuff. And people sort of consider their government as theirs. So they think, oh, my government is, I'm part of my government, but you aren't. It's a scam. So and that is the big scam that people just don't understand. And it's also democracy. We think that we vote for people, but we can see clearly now they're not working in our benefit. So they do some nice things here and there, but the important things is all wrong and it's all benefiting big companies to come in, take over all your natural resources and just steal you blind. So that's sort of the scam, and we need to understand that it's. So they use the government and your national identity to sort of make you believe that it's still fair that your government owns your house, but it's not your government. These are still people, and these are people that don't want to show themselves and have no good intentions with your life, and you will have no control over it once you're in their communistic system, because there's nobody you vote for, there's no press anymore, there's no freedom of speech, nothing. So you will be not aware what's going on, and you have no control. You have no control over your children. If they say, okay, we'll take your children, we put them in a school there, you will never see them again. And that's how that system will work.
So this is what you extrapolated for yourselves and not only did you come up with a different solution, you started programming against that. And can you tell us, where can people read more on that? Can they use it already? How far along are you?
Yeah. So my biggest question was: is it possible to make a sort of digital, a decentralized system, a sort of an app on a phone that doesn't use internet, which was sort of an important one for me, because the internet is also controlled by the same people that want to bring the central bank digital currency to us, and they can simply shut down the internet. So if we have an alternative system and it would run on the internet, they could shut us down basically. So it was very important for me to be able to make a decentralized system that people could use without anybody interfering with it. And I was not sure if that was possible, but I think I found a way to do it. It works with, I call it personal blockchains, which is like a little file that you keep on your phone, which holds all your identity information, your self-sovereign identity information, plus all the transactions that you did personally. And what you do is you just share it with the person that you do a transaction with. So if you are in a region, in a small, let's say in your neighborhood, and you have like 100 people using that app, you don't need nobody else. So you can just exchange these little files, these little blockchains with each other, personal blockchains. You just collect them like a stamp collector, and your app just looks at it if everything is done fairly. But that's sort of technically how it works. And it works without the internet. So you can just, if you have two phones, you can just exchange that file using your Wi-Fi antenna without going, let's say, to a central Wi-Fi system. You can just, let's say, exchange that little file, and then you do a transaction. And the nice thing is you can do that with your little, let's say, your little village somewhere in the Netherlands, or you can do it with a little village in Africa. And without seeing each other, you can still use it. And when you use the same parameters, which is that you have 1 coin per hour for every person, and you have like a depreciation and devaluation of that value with, let's say, 40%. If you do it in the same way, and let's say in 10 years you meet somebody from the Netherlands here in Nigeria, then you can still interact with each other because the money was created in the same way. So it's the same money. And that means you don't need any exchanges, no different calculations to see if that money is the same as this money. No, it's all the same. And it can work. So you work separately from each other, but you can also grow to each other, which is very important, which is, I think, one of my biggest, let's say, how you call it, my comments on if I look at the negative sides of a regional coin. It can work sort of for a region, But if you have no way to connect to another region without an exchange, then it will still be very difficult to make that work in the end. So that's also what I solved.
So that's what you see popping up also, people starting their local currencies in their village or in the town or in the municipalities. And what you're saying is, well, we would rather have something that will be according to the same parameters, so you can exchange money, you can trade with people outside of your community also, even though it's a different coin. And if we would agree on every hour being worth one coin, for instance, and then it depreciates over time. You said 40%, or you mean 40% annually?
Per year.
Yeah, per year. And to contrast that with the current situation in the Netherlands or in Europe, we have inflation, which means everything increases in price 14%, or you could also say your money decreases in value, in purchasing power, 14% over a year. So currently, that 40% that you propose is already at 14% in the Netherlands. You might be able to compare it with that. So you want to spend your money before it loses its value. That's what you say.
Yeah, and you also, it makes money less valuable. So if you would reduce the depreciation, then it makes more sense to just collect money, and it will take other people that are not well off more time to get that money back also. So what you do basically with the depreciation is you lose money, but that money is used to create another coin, and that coin is given, is shared by everybody. So it's a sort of a social thing. So it's not that you lose your money, but this money is also being distributed to everybody else. So you with your depreciation, you help other people. If you're very wealthy, so you lose quite a lot of money, but you help, let's say, a lot of people getting that money back.
Yeah, and
so
also
it's a social security net.
Yeah. Well, that's also what you need to wrap your head around. It's a more social, more just and equal system than we have currently, but it's still a capitalist system. I can use the coin that I get every hour and invest it in bricks, in buildings, or in gold, or in silver, or in Bitcoin, or whatever is of value. I can still save, but just not in that currency, not in that the money that you created is for exchanging an economic system with each other.
You will still have millionaires, you will still have billionaires.
Exactly.
It will still happen. Yeah.
So how far along are you? Where can people go if they want to read more on this?
Yeah. So it works. We did a pilot, and you can see all the results on it on on our website. It's not. I'm working with a group of people on it. It's called onecoinage.org. So a one and then coin and an age of hour .org. .org. So you can see all the latest developments there, and we did a pilot. Currently, we are, let's say, breaking down our software and building it up again on a GitLab site, which means it will become open source. So it's nothing anything like a cryptocurrency, for example. So I will not gain anything of doing this. I can't buy this coin because everybody starts at the same moment with the same amount of coins. So there's nothing to gain here for me or the people that work in here. And yeah, so it's and we do that on this GitLab page, and on the GitLab page we now make it more professional, so that it looks better. With better, let's say, description how it exactly works, and that everybody that is into programming can go there and help us, let's say, expand this system. So it already works, but we just want to make it look more better, and make sure that more people understand what it's all about.
And also that people that I cannot program. I'm an IT person, but programming is not my skill. But people that are savvy can dig into your code and see what you did. That's what open source means. Everybody can work with you and can verify how you created that thing, right?
Yeah, and that's very important because this money is all about trust. So only when people trust that it's done properly, then it works. Because if it's not trustworthy, then why would you get involved? So it must be very transparent, and this is the most transparent way we can go, which is also the entire opposite of what the central bank did, because we have no clue what they are doing, and they will never tell you.
Okay, so
my-
people can go to onecoinh.org if they want to read up on this, if they want to work with this thing. We closed on the Dutch part of this interview with an example that I made of El Salvador that's embracing Bitcoin currently. Are there communities, are there groups of people embracing this solution already? Are people actually buying a loaf of bread already, trying this thing that you built? Or when will that happen, do you think?
Yeah. Well, first it needs to we need to redo the system that we did. So probably in the next 2 months it will be operational again, and then we can start do more pilots or even do it, just put it live and take it from there. That is also a solution. There are 2 other initiatives, one in Germany, one in France. Monnaie Libre in France and Circles in Germany. With Circles, they already have, let's say, shops that do it. That way you can use these coins. Only I think they made some very fundamental mistakes with those systems. It's not really decentralized, or not really not. It's just on a server, and also the vouching system is done quite wrong with both of them, where they say, well, you need to have 3 people vouch for you before you can enter, which will cause a lot of problems, in my opinion.
All right.
But these initiatives are already very far, and they're working already like also 7 years. On those.
So you're up and running before the central bank digital currencies are, if I can estimate that. People should be able to start trying this out early next year, 2023, and programmers should be able to move into your GitHub and see what you've been building once you've moved over the next couple of months.
Exactly.
Onecoinh.org. Sounds nice, Teun.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for this
try.
talk. Talk to you next time.
Fine.
Take care.
Thank you.
Het gaat hier vandaag over saamhorigheid.
Dagje zonder hemel.
Rustig, liegt niet. Als normaal maken is wat niet is normaal.
Every nation
maar blauwe
in
lucht.
every region now has a decision to make.
En dan ook geen hel meer.
You think I'm joking? Predator
Dat
drones.
is best makkelijk.
You will never see it coming.
Wat dacht je, alle mensen
Laat staan dat ik kan ingaan over vuur.
bezig met vandaag.